So you just went along with it?
I was scared. I didn't know what else to do.
Tonight, a questionable question line by Kelowna RCMP while investigating a report of sexual assault brings reaction across political lines.
And what we're doing now is trying to really bring that local knowledge or Indigenous knowledge to managing fire risk around communities.
We look ahead to this summer's fire forecast.
According to the Wall Street Journal, probably the most important music award show in North America.
And the Manito Ahbee Festival kicks off in Winnipeg.
Good evening, welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward.
And I'm Melissa Ridgen. A video released earlier this week has shocked the country and has leaders from coast to coast, including the House of Commons, demanding answers.
APTN Investigates obtained a video of a Kelowna RCMP officer interviewing an Indigenous teen girl about an alleged sexual assault. It has people questioning tactics police used while interviewing the teen. Brittany Hobson has some of that reaction and a warning some viewers may find this disturbing.
I didn't consent, but I didn't say no.
So you just went along with it?
I was scared. I didn't know what else to do.
This video of police questioning an Indigenous teen girl has created a ripple of emotions across the country.
This is totally inappropriate. And I don't know where people get that kind of right to re-victimize somebody. It's disgusting.
Will you talk about this with the Justice Minister to try and address this issue?
Judicial training is something that is becoming increasingly important as we go forward.
APTN obtained a copy of the video, which is from 2012. APTN is not identifying the teen. In the video, Kelowna RCMP questioned the teen about an alleged sexual assault. It goes on for more than 2 hours. At one point, the officer says,
because I need to know, were you at all turned on during this at all,
No.
even a little bit?
No.
Physically, you weren't at all responsive to his advances, even maybe subconsciously?
Maybe subconsciously, but no, not. I was really scared.
Okay.
Since reported by APTN on Monday, hundreds of people have taken to social media to express anger and shock. On Twitter, American actress Patricia Arquette wrote, "Kelowna constable should be fired for his disgusting line of questioning to this child who was sexually assaulted. Canada, do something." Also on Twitter, NDP MP Nathan Cullen said, "I don't understand how this happens. A male officer asking a young Indigenous woman reporting sexual assault, 'Were you turned on?' This should be investigated and this officer reprimanded at the very, very least. My God." Another user wrote, "Any person who finds this shocking has not known or been a female victim in an RCMP detachment." In Ottawa, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer questioned Minister of Public Safety Ralph Goodale.
This morning I was shocked and horrified by a recently released recording broadcast by APTN News of an RCMP officer questioning a young female Indigenous sexual assault victim. Obviously, this line of questioning was appalling and insensitive to the young woman who was coming forward with her story. I'd like to ask the Minister of Public Safety if he can update the House as to whatever reviews he might be contemplating to ensure that this type of thing does not happen in the future.
What was revealed in that video was absolutely abhorrent. The apparent attitudes and techniques that were on display in 2012 are profoundly outdated, offensive, and wrong. The RCMP and all police forces must work continuously to conduct themselves appropriately. No survivor of sexual assault should ever fear that their case will not be taken seriously or that they will be re-victimized in the process.
Yes. In a statement to APTN, RCMP said, "The RCMP is not in a position to provide further context or perspective, as the case is subject to restrictions under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, an ongoing criminal code matter, and civil litigation proceedings." We'll have more in the coming days. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And you can find much more on that story on our website, aptnnews.ca. 3 days of hearings about the proposed settlement agreement for Indian Day School survivors came to a close today. After concerns and issues were tabled in federal court, there's more waiting to be done. Joining us now is our reporter, Lindsay Richardson. Lindsay, thanks for joining us. Can you sum up what happened in court today?
Well, the courtroom and the overflow rooms were both packed this morning with hundreds of survivors who were awaiting a decision that in the end never came. So at about 3 o'clock this afternoon, federal judge Michael Fellin decided that he would reserve his judgment for another day. Now, earlier in the morning, we did speak to some survivors outside of the courtroom who said they predicted this would be the outcome at the end of the day. And some objectors to the proposed settlement agreement say that more time is better because it gives the judge time to consider their concerns and other issues that have been tabled throughout the 3-day hearings.
You mentioned those objectors to the settlement. They gathered outside the courthouse earlier this morning. What are some of their concerns?
Well, there are quite a few to consider. The first would be the minimum proposed $10,000 amount. Some people are concerned about taking a one-size-fits-all approach to trauma-based compensation. There were other concerns raised about the government's intent to keep the process simple and how this would affect the fairness of compensation in the end. There were also issues raised about remote communities, whether or not people have access to internet or the required documents to apply for the settlements, as well as language. What do people do if they don't speak English or French or in need of interpreters, things like that. But most shockingly, perhaps, was something that came up from a federal lawyer today who told the courtroom that an approximately 11 deaths of day school survivors occurred this week, or maybe totally 2,000 annually. So the numbers are quite staggering, and this is part of the reason why plaintiffs are pushing for the judgment to be pushed through sooner than later.
That all said, throughout the 3 days, some changes to the application process were made by the judge?
Yeah, they are showing that they've learned from problems from the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement. So throughout the 3 days, the court made some notes and did grant extensions. For example, the application period has now been extended from 1 to 2.5 years, as we reported yesterday. And the opt-out period also was extended from 60 to about 90 days. Now, some survivors who spoke in front of the court today were concerned that the schools that they attended were not on the designated list provided by the government. So schools will be added before the judgment is rendered by Justice Phelan. So 5 schools so far have been added to the list, and others that were nowhere on the list are being researched for consideration. As well, student abuse is now being recognized as part of the claims, and lawyers were quick to shut down rumors today that Canada can actually challenge claims that come through. So this was, told to be patently false, and all claims that are filed with the government are judged as automatically true.
As you mentioned, Lindsay, we're losing survivors almost every day here. What happens next?
Well, Judge Fellin didn't provide a window or a time frame for when he would be rendering his judgment, but in his brief closing arguments today, he did want to stress to survivors that they have been heard, that their resilience has been well noted, and what he's doing now is really taking the time to digest and process all arguments from all sides before coming forward with a firm decision.
And many people waiting on that decision. Lindsay, appreciate you taking some time to bring us up to speed.
Thanks.
And you can find much more on day 3 of the Indian residential or day school settlement, what unfolded there today on our website, aptnnews.ca. Time for us to take a quick break, but when we come back, what's in store for the 2019 forest fire season?
First, here's tomorrow's weather forecast.
Starting off on the east coast, we've got 10 in Cloud and St. John's and Halifax, 9 in Fredericton. Mix of sun and cloud and forward for Cartwright, 10 in rain in Happy Valley Goose Bay. Val-d'Or is 12 in rain, as is Rouen-Noranda, 14 in St. Jovite. 20 in rain in Sarnia and London, 11 in rain in North Bay. 7 in rain in Big Trout Lake, 13 and cloud in Thunder Bay. Sunny skies in Nepaw and 11 degrees, 7s for Puckatawagan and Thompson. 12s for Gimli and Winnipeg and some cloud, 12 and sunny for Brennan and Dauphin. Mix of sun and cloud and 12 for Regina and Swift Current, 13 and sunshine in Saskatoon. 12 in sunshine in Uranium City and La Ronge, 13 and sunny in Meadow Lake. Welcome back. The Canadian Forest Service has just released their 2019 fire season forecast for across the country. Amy Christensen specializes in fire evacuations and is one of 5 researchers working with government on something called the First Nations Wildfire Evacuation Partnership. She joins us on Skype from Edmonton, Alberta, to explain what that partnership entails and what's in store for fire season this summer. Amy, thanks for being here. So tell us what's in store for the 2019 fire season.
Hi there. So what it looks like is that we're actually going to see kind of average conditions for the next little bit here. We're going to then see an increased risk in June and July in British Columbia again, unfortunately. And then it's looking like it's going to then expand kind of into the prairie provinces for August.
Lovely. So there's lots of people who say that this is a result of climate change, that we've got increased fire risk. Is that the case?
Yes, definitely, I would say. So what we're seeing now is a trend to more frequent fire events. And we're also seeing an increased risk to Indigenous communities. So what our research projections are showing is that we're going to be seeing a substantial risk in the next 50 to 100 years to especially First Nation reserves that are located in the forest.
So and what's being done to provide help for these communities as we're looking forward at this kind of impending doom?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say, like, one thing that I would point out is that, Indigenous communities are resilient and have survived with wildland fire in Canada since time immemorial. So that's one positive that we have, and what we're doing now is trying to really bring that local knowledge or Indigenous knowledge to managing fire risk around communities. And the federal government is also, putting in some budget money to help with fire smart mitigation around communities too. So I think for me, like, my hope lies in, restoring and bringing back burning to the land, training Indigenous firefighters.
So you had said about a traditional Indigenous knowledge brought to firefighting. Can you give us an example of what some of that looks like?
Yeah, so one of the projects that we're working on right now is revitalizing cultural burning practices. So working with communities in British Columbia, mostly, to bring back kind of their knowledge from their elders and fire keepers onto the land. And so what that looks like is, bringing back burning for moose habitat, for improving berry patches, so kind of these low understory birds. And what those do is they get rid of the fuel load, and therefore they have a cultural objective, but then they also reduce wildfire risk and make it easier to fight forest fires.
Is this cutting edge to bring Indigenous knowledge to firefighting? This is the first I've heard of it, but am I out of the loop?
Well, no, I think, that we have, like, our nations have been firefighting for a long time, but when settlers came, then they said that they had kind of, fire basically went with a Western knowledge system then of fire suppression. And I think what we're seeing is that that's not working on the landscape. And I think that there's a real hunger for Indigenous knowledge, to come back and see how we can better prepare our communities for fire, and, how Indigenous people for so long lived successfully with fire.
I love this.
To me, exciting.
And what else what would be your advice to people who are living in rural areas where you're at risk of forest fires this season? What advice would you offer to people?
Yeah, so I would say, contact your local fire chief if you're really nervous to get advice on, things that you can do around your property or in your community. Some things can be as simple as, moving a wood pile or clearing up debris and deadfall around your house or watering your lawn. Like, there are some quite easy things that you can do to reduce risk. There's also, I would point people to the Fire Smart Canada program. Right now, they don't have an Indigenous-focused product there, but we're actually working with Indigenous people across the country to develop one that will be released in the fall. So I think, I would point people there and also to their elders in their community, that have successfully survived fire for a long time.
I love this. Amy, thanks so much for taking the time to share this advice with us.
Okay, thank you so much. Nice to see you.
A Saskatchewan man decided to fly a Nazi and a Confederate flag in his hometown of Kelowna last week. But a young man from a nearby First Nation was having none of it, drove to the town and removed the flags and burned them.
We covered the story extensively on APTN National News, but on today's In Focus, we went deeper and into the issue of race relations in that province. Here's some of what our panelists had to say about everyday life in Saskatchewan as a First Nations person.
When we talk about racism, it's always been there. It's always below the surface. Everything that we do, wherever we go, there's certain situations we're put in as a First Nations person where you can actually feel it sometimes, where people don't like you. And you know, from my position as a political person, in the business dealings that we do, we face it all the time. Like, I'll give you an example. When we do business deals, and as soon as they know that it's a First Nation that's coming to purchase land or parcels of land, the price goes up automatically. You know, they raise the prices on us because they're dealing with First Nations. So it's always a challenge. So being a First Nations person, I guess it's kind of been the norm. You know, growing up, we've always faced it. It's politicians, you know, mask it, is the way I see it. You know, it's there. It's in the justice system. We see it all the time. Like I said, it's right there in front of us all the time.
It's different living in Saskatchewan than going elsewhere. You're always in the back of your mind on guard for racism and discrimination. You can tell when somebody has that attitude towards you, or your children. I have children, so I know when I'm being looked down on or they're being looked down on. So, and I'll say something. You know what? Not everybody has a voice to say something. And there's parts of Saskatchewan where you don't go. And a lot of those areas are the rural areas, just because it's not safe, especially in the wake of what happened to Colton. It gave people a permission to be more open with their racism, and they are, as you see by this display of the Nazi flag.
We've got the rest of tomorrow's weather forecast for you before another quick break.
But first, here's a sneak peek of an interview we have for you tomorrow with Enoch hockey hero Jordan Tutu.
We tend to hold a lot in and use substances to help cope with issues. And I've dealt with that. And now it's just about me telling my story and having our people relate and say, hey, if Jordan has been through it, you know, he's played in the NHL, he's been a professional athlete, you know, it doesn't matter who you are. We all fight a fight no one knows about. Be kind to one another.
Northern Alberta, we've got 12 in sunshine in Fort Chip, 14 in cloudy in Peace River, 13 in rain in Red Deer and Lethbridge, 15 in cloudy in Medicine Hat, 18 in rain in Campbell River, 19 and cloudy in Quesnel, mostly sunny in Dease Lake and 13 degrees, 17 and rain in Prince George, 18 in sunshine in Mayo and Dawson and Beaver Creek, 14 in sunshine in Norman Wells, 11 in rain in Watee, 19 in Trout Lake. Inuvik is clear and 5. Sax Harbor, -2, clear skies. Baker Lake is sunshine and 2 degrees, as is Repulse Bay, 0 for Whale Cove. Goa Haven snowing at -2, Igloolik -1, and Clyde River -1 and sunny. Welcome back. Hide tanners are meeting in Yellowknife to share their talents with the community. Our reporter Charlotte Morit-Jacobs visited the busy camp today and has that story.
It's a familiar sound in Sambake Park. It's the 4th annual Urban Hide Tanning Camp in downtown Yellowknife, hosted by the not-for-profit Thene Nawo. Shirley Drybones from Ray learned from her mother.
Just like it's natural. I know what I'm doing. Like, I don't really need to ask because she's done it a lot of times in front of me, so it comes natural to me.
She's working with caribou, something she hasn't done for years.
Different kind of job, variety. Like, there's taking the hair off and taking the skin off, and you try and make it smooth and dry it and then tan it. There's lots of work.
For 10 days each year, the camp sets up shop, bringing together people to witness and take in the skills from elders and tanners. A long process that pays off.
I want to get it done.
Really, any hide camp. Just ask me and I'll go. Stephanie Poole of Litzelkek has been to many hide tanning camps.
I always enjoy spending time with other hide tanners and just having time away from your other responsibilities to work on hides together is really fun.
She tans hides as a way of practicing sovereignty.
And it's also really important for me to keep our relationship with the land and water, you know, all the animals in our territory. I think that's part of our responsibility as Dene and as Indigenous people.
She shares her expertise with all those willing to learn and sees the camp as a way to inform non-Indigenous people about Dene ways.
So that's why we really enjoy and host all the school kids here, and they will often bring their parents and families back after school or on the weekends.
The camp runs until May 21st and will be extending to a mentorship tanning camp in Wati next month. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Great story. This week marks the return of the annual Manito Ahbee Festival in Winnipeg. The event is celebrating its 14th year. Here's Ashley Branson to tell us what to expect.
Around 100 people gathered in downtown Winnipeg to kick off the 14th annual Manito Ahbee Festival. The event began with a grand entry and the lighting of a sacred fire. It'll burn for duration of the 5 days of events. The festival aims to unite nations from around the world to celebrate the best of Indigenous music and arts.
It shows the positive aspects of Indigenous culture. We see too much in the media of all the negative aspects, and I think it's very, very important that the general population find out that, you know, that's only a small part of what we see.
The chair of the Board of Governors, David Dondino, says one of the highlights of the festival is hearing the different types of music at the Indigenous Music Awards.
According to the Wall Street Journal, probably the most important music award show in North America. So I think we can be proud of that.
Along with the Indigenous Music Awards, Manito Ahbee will be hosting a square dancing exhibition, a jigging competition, and an Indigenous art expo. The week will end with a 2-day international powwow. For more details, you can go to manitoahbee.com. Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And if you are in Winnipeg this week, there is so much going on. You still have time to visit the trade show at Vision Quest, and of course the Indigenous Music Awards are also happening this week.
And if you're at Vision Quest tomorrow, I'll see you there. Also, if you missed that in focus today, we're online at aptnnews.ca or on APTN News' Facebook page, or you can watch it here on rerun tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central. I'm Melissa Ridgen.
And I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night.